Happy Wine Wednesday, everyone. I'm sipping on Chardonnay in my, oh, you can't see it. I've got to get a better light. But it says, there's always time for friends, wine, and coffee. Just making the point that drinking coffee or juice is fine. Holly, what are you sipping on?
Tonight I've got Bacardi and Coke Zero.
There we go. Chris,
Lemon iced tea.
that's my point, is it works. And we do have Chris Carey with us, which is super exciting. Ray and Cheryl have yet to join. Sometimes if we have a topic or a guest, they kind of stand off. That's fine. Anybody in the comments, remember, we want your stories too. Tonight, it is technically open chat. So if you have a question that's not on topic, feel free to ask it. We're here to answer it and discuss it. But Holly and I, last week after Wine Wednesday, we started talking about the unusual contaminants that happen to your tank. And when it's time to freak out and like, oh my gosh, we have to do a major overhaul water change. And then the times where it's like, we need to fix this, but it's not a crisis, right? So we wanted to kind of put that out there. Um, to see audio and video is good, Zenjinja. And yes, I'm so excited we have Chris with us to have this discussion. But anyway, so tonight's topic technically is unusual contaminants and how they affect a tank. If you're in the Wine Wednesday chat that we have, I actually started posting some links because I was trying to be prepared for once and have some research available, because unusual contaminants can span from, Holly had a situation where a friend's dog they found the friend's dog licking the RODI water.
Drank the
So then you're
RODI bucket.
right. So then you're thinking, is the dog contaminating the water, the saliva? But then you turn around and there are dogs and cats that will lick out of the tank. Then you come into, is the cat or dog going to be harmed by by the chemicals and such in the saltwater tank? I have smokers in my house. Ashes have been dropped. I can totally admit that. Plus the smoke in the air. What does that equal? And I've had this, I looked online before we started, and I found so many experiences close to mine. I am a freak about the Seahorse tanks where you don't spray anything anywhere near it, right? But I have teenage daughters that like to spray perfume everywhere. And if they're hurrying and getting ready, they might be near a tank, and I'm freaking out. I've got a significant other that is a clean freak, believe it or not, knowing me. And he likes to clean and he likes his sprays and such. And it's just a good topic. Like, when do you know that spraying too close to the tank will affect the tank? Differences of opinion occur for sure. Hi, Scotty, the fish freak. And good to see you. Love your opinions on this topic, because I'm curious. Like, I brought up this topic to share my experiences and us share, but also to hear yours, because a lot of you guys in the reefing industry have a lot more knowledge about this than I ever could, about smoking affecting alkalinity, and pH and stuff like that. I really don't have an answer, so that's why I brought it up for a topic of discussion. But Holly, why don't we start off with you? And Ray, you need to get in here. You still have valuable input, even when you don't think you do.
Yeah.
But you can stay in the comments if you want. But Holly, why don't you start us off? Tell us what happened in your situation and why you were worried, or why they were
Boy,
worried.
I've had a few things happen actually, and the topic came up last week. Actually, in our little after party, Kelly and I were discussing. I was telling her about an incident that had happened earlier in the week. My friend came to visit, and she has a big dog, and the big dog comes to visit with her, and I put out a bowl of water for the dog. And on this particular day, his bowl of water wasn't filled. So he promptly went into the room where I make my RODI water and took a drink out of that. And my friend freaked out and she says, Holly,
Yep.
Blue was just drinking the Seahorse's water. she says, could that hurt them? And I kind of laughed. I said, I really don't think so. I said, she knows they're prone to bacterial infections and things. And I said, but I don't think a dog drinking their water is the same as, high organics. Or so I said, I don't think it's an issue. And then the one thing that did happen to me about a year or so ago, I have my tank sitting next to my couch, my display tank. And the sump is actually catty corner to the tank. So it sits in front of me when I'm on the couch, and there's a table over the top of it. And I was having a plate of Mexican food that night. I was having sopas, which are like a little tiny 4-inch tortilla with some meat and a little bit of cheese and lettuce and sauce on it. So I set my plate down on the table, and somehow, clumsy me, I knocked it off. It did a flip and landed in my sump.
Right.
And thankfully, I'd eaten most of it, but there was like half of a sopa. And like I said, they're little. So it was only about 2 inches of tortilla and shredded lettuce, a tiny bit of crema, which is like Mexican sour cream, and a little bit of shredded cheese. So really not much, but my reflexes were super quick. I like grabbed the stuff all that I could out of the sump before it even sank to the bottom. But then
Right.
there was pieces of shredded lettuce floating around in there.
Right.
And
Well,
not
the thing,
long after, I see pieces of shredded lettuce in the display tank just kind of floating around.
yeah, you collected them when you saw them. I
Yeah.
mean, get them out. But I mean, the big concern for me there, when we talked about it last week, I kind of did a little bit of research. There's no real research on this, guys. Like I saw Scotty, the fish tank, or the fish freak, excuse me, said, while I don't have any other animals right now, I want them in the future. What if a dog or cat hair gets in the tank? That's one of the things I was
I've
researching.
cleaned that
And
out of
with
my
with
stuff.
the food, with the food, my biggest concern was anything like milk or cream,
Mhm.
or sugars.
Mhm.
But Chris, before I tell you what I found, what are your thoughts about if you accidentally drop some food or some candy into the tank?
Well, you can play one for me, one for you with tacos or nachos or any Mexican food you like, play Polly and with your seahorses. Be like, yeah, have some, guys. But just try and mechanically get anything you can out of the tank, and stuff like you said, like cream or sour cream or anything kind of oily. You're going to get like that oil residue on top of the tank because oil and water don't mix.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope that you'd have a protein skimmer that might help, process some of that and try and extract some of that out of the system. Yet another reason to have a protein skimmer, but just try and mechanically remove as much as you can. And what Scotty was saying, like about dog or cat hair, some of the workers at Seahorse World own pets, and you would occasionally get a tour guide or whatever that's standing over a tank and talking and describing things to the tourists and whatnot, and inadvertently some of their pet hair ends up in some of the tanks and that. Whenever I used to see any of that, I used to just take them off. Fortunately, dog and cat hair, when it's dry like that, usually sticks to the top of the water. So even if you were to put some in the tank, usually it just sort of stays at the surface unless there's a lot of agitation, and in which case it'll eventually make its way down and through. But if you've got pretty decent filtration in the tank, it'll make its way into the filter and be mechanically filtered by any filter floss or Dacron or whatever you've got, sponge, and hopefully not impact the seahorses too much. So it shouldn't be too much of a concern. Just don't go, drowning your cat or putting too much in there. But usually your filtration should hopefully keep that up. Otherwise, if you do notice that there's clumps of tacos or hair or whatever.
Oh, I love that. Yes, please. That is the message of this channel. Please don't drown your cat in your fish tank. Don't do that. We don't want that to happen.
I
But
want to
Chris,
say when I did clean out my sump a while back, like a year ago or so, I think you'll remember I cleaned all my bio balls and stuff. I don't have any fur babies now, but when I first started with the seahorses, I did have one of my dogs still left, and I had a lot. My dog was like a pit bull type dog, short hair, and there was a lot of his hair stuck in my bio balls.
yeah,
But it didn't seem to hurt the seahorses. I think it just became part of the biomedia.
Yeah.
right. Exactly. And before I jump back into like foods and cigarette smoke and stuff and ash, I remember Holly had another story, Chris, where she had a year where, was it praying mantis, Holly, that we're getting in?
Oh,
Moths,
the
and tell that
praying
story.
mantis. Well, in the summertime, my tanks attract insects because of where I live in the woods, and they have a black light that's on at night. And until I got really good door screens, I used to have a problem with moths coming in. And the moths would come in and drown in the tank and in the sump. And I had praying mantis coming in to hunt the moths, but the praying mantis never got into the tank or the sump. They were smart. I'd find them walking on airlines and the light and the edge of the tank, but I never had to rescue a praying mantis out of the tank. They were smart. They never fell in. Moths, on the other hand, I was constantly having to grab a net and net moths out of the tank.
It's like, especially in a bigger facility, maybe you don't run into that, or maybe you do on a larger scale. Is that something you would ever worry about, or would you just be like, get it out? That was you, Chris. Holly?
I can hear you.
It would depend on what's
go.
happening exactly and what kind of a scale it's on. So if I was worried about, sorry, am I cutting out?
Yeah.
Sorry, the
Oh, a little
internet's
bit.
probably not the best here. There we go. So I was just saying, like, it depends on what sort of scale it's happening on. So if you've got a very small tank, say you've got a say a 120 liter tank or something, and you've got some big moths that flying in there, if you've got enough of them, then it could cause a problem. Whereas if you've got a big facility and you've got maybe 10,000 plus liters over several tanks that are all sort of in the one system, and you've got a few bugs flying in, it's really not the end of the world. All I'd really say is try and mechanically remove as many of them as you can, either through your filtration or just mechanically pulling them out, or with your cleaning routine. And if it's becoming a recurring problem, maybe look at having lids for your tanks, or some wire mesh or something to go over the top. I do find fiberglass fly wire mesh, like you put on your windows to stop bugs coming in, makes up really, really good like mesh lids for tanks and stops any bugs or physical contaminants getting in.
And it doesn't stop the airflow exchange, right? So like it's stopping what you want to stop, but it's also not like I have never put a hood or a lid on a Seahorse tank because we're so worried about airflow exchange. But that kind of thing that you're talking about, Chris, with the mesh, that's perfect. It works. I mean, it does what you need it to do without affecting the tank in a negative way. Holly, Ray wants to know, can you train the praying mantis to feed on bristleworms?
That's wishful thinking. If they put on little diving suits and went and got them?
Right? That'd be nice, right? Well, and that's like when I did a little bit of research on this question about food. I know I'm jumping around, guys, but when you're talking about food, one of the things I was concerned with was sugars. The other thing I was concerned with was just organics, right? Anything dropped into the tank is causing organics to build up. Food rotting is the same as mice is rotting, right? So you still don't want it sitting rotting in the tank, especially if nothing will eat it. And one of the things that I saw that many people online have said, and that would be my first answer, is if you do have a cleanup crew, right? If you've got, I'm telling you what, Mexican turbo snails will eat anything, including leftover taco. They will, I promise. So just having them in the tank as a resource in case something happens is a really good idea, because they'll eat anything decaying, going nasty, sitting there for a minute under rocks, they'll find it and eat it. Another thing, I've never kept crabs in seahorse tanks, Holly, but your hermit crabs would also like eat any of that nasty stuff, right?
Mhm. I imagine
Skin.
so. I mean, I don't
Okay.
have. I only have one little guy left now, but yeah, they seem to eat anything. So
And I did, right. So that's one answer is, just as a precaution, having some snails or hermit crabs that will eat. The number one snail would be Nacerius snail, because they'll eat anything that's nasty. They love the nasty. But I don't keep Nacerius snails in tanks that I don't have sand, because they're the little snails that, love to go under the sand, and you'll see their little snouts poked up, and they come up the second there's the smell or the whatever. As soon
Mhm.
as food hits the tank, you see them come up out of the sand. Since I have mainly bare bottom tanks, I don't typically keep Nacerius. You probably can. Everything I've read, it said they like to be under sand. So in bare bottom tanks, I use the Mexican turbos. But a cleanup crew is one answer. The other thing about food, before we move forward, is just like I mentioned earlier, is the sugars, right? Because I was thinking, you start to get into sugars, you start to get into, people use sugar to dose their tanks, right? I mean, there are people,
Yeah, carbon
believe me, I
dosing.
didn't, yeah. So it's carbon dosing. So a little bit of the sugar in the tank is not going to hurt anything, right? I mean, a lot is a
probably
different
depends on the
story.
dose. Yeah,
Right. Of
much.
course, it always depends on the dose. But if you look at it like people use literal sugar to dose their tanks in some situations, I'm just saying if a little bit of candy's accidentally dropped, get it out, right? Or, if there's some sour cream, it might be cloudy, use some carbon, or, some sort of absorbent to get it out, maybe do a water change, but it's not something. I was telling Holly before we started, I've had situations where something happened and I
Mhm.
literally had to be at work in 10 minutes. And it was like, do I call off work? Is this that much of an emergency? And it just wasn't, like it seemed like it to me. The tank didn't look good. It was cloudy. I was worried, but having that knowledge that maybe it's not the end of the world might help someone in the future is what I'm hoping. But anything else about sugars? I'm trying to look through my notes I did read on Reef to Reef. I want to shout out the places that I saw this information. Some of it's scientific, some of it's not. So when I'm reading from you from just like Reef to Reef, I will let you know. And on Reef to Reef, I did read that, adding sugar to a reef tank or a saltwater tank can generate a bacterial bloom. So if we're talking about it, again, size matters, quantity matters. If you're talking about a smaller tank and your kid dumps a bunch of anything sugary into the tank, that might be a case where you'd want to, maybe do a huge water change and use some major carbon, because you don't want it to cause a bacterial bloom. But sugar's also added to, enhance a tank. So just depends on the amount. Anything you guys want to add?
No, that sounds good.
No, apparently not. Okay. All
Oh,
right.
I see. Ray says he has had bugs get in his tank. White flies
Let's see.
and fruit flies, but
Flies, right.
never had a problem from them.
That's
Well,
the
you
thing.
gotta think. I mean, when they're living in nature, out in the ocean and stuff. I mean, trees fall in the water, plants, bugs.
Right. The
Natural
only
stuff. I wouldn't worry as much about. Like a few moths that fall in. I mean, they're not trying to eat them or anything. You
right.
see 'em, you get them out. It's not a big deal.
And the only preface I would give to that is that again, you have to remember how bugs I've never worried about. If there's a bug
Mhm.
in the tank, get it out, right? But I'm not worried that it's causing some contaminant.
Yes.
Anything else, if you're talking about sugars and foods or candy or the other contaminants we're about to talk about, then it's a different story where it can change the chemical makeup. So I would say, as we talk about this, just beware that we're saying the smaller the tank, the more you have to worry, right? The more filtration you have, the less you have to worry. As Chris pointed out, if you have a good skimmer, if you have good filtration, that makes a difference. And Robert King actually is in here. Hi, Robert. We can't wait to have you back on as a guest. But in all of my tanks, I have a Robert King chamber,
Mhm.
right? And that it acts as a bio and chemical media so that if something like that is dropped into the tank by accident, and we'll get more into that in just a moment, but that's like immediately sucking it to it, getting rid of it and helping the whole process. So I like having filtration media that helps with these kinds of problems because shit does happen, right? I mean, things get dropped into the tank. We've all got kids or cats or whatever.
I don't
And back
remember
to
who it was, but I saw a post somewhere a long time ago about, I think someone's kids or grandkids was trying to feed their seahorses Cheerios.
right. Yep. And it gets soggy. You can't find it. It's under rocks, and of course you're going to worry. I mean, I would at least.
Hmm.
But I just don't think I think that the more that you set up your tank for success, the less you have to worry, right? Like, would I still do a water change? Yes. But would I wait until I went to work and got home? Probably, because I make sure I have a Robert King chamber and a skimmer and a filtration system that will hopefully take care of it anyways. And then do a and then I have cleanup crew that's going to eat anything just left over, and then I would do a huge water change maybe when I got home, just to be sure that it was okay. But it's not a crisis, right? You don't have to like, oh my God, I dropped my taquito, the world's gonna end, right? And
Well, if I had dumped a whole huge plate of Mexican food in the, I probably would have worried about that instead of just a
if
piece.
and if you're standing there when it happens, of course the immediate thing is turn off the tank, you know, let it settle, which sounds awful, but let it settle so that you can remove it as much as you can. And then everything I've just said, if you've got a cleanup crew, if you've got good filtration, it's just not a crisis until it's a crisis. If you're talking about a 30-gallon tank and you dump a whole plate of Mexican and there's no skimmer and there's no char chamber, then it's a different story. Just to be clear, then you need to call off work and like get the Seahorses out and change the water. But other than that, it's going to be fixed on its own because of this filtration you've set up, right? The other thing I wanted to say before we go into like cigarette smoke and other stuff is someone asked about cat hair and dog hair, right? And we know that that can clog filtration if you allow it to get too built up. But as Chris said, typically it'll float. If you've got really excellent agitation, as we do usually in Seahorse tanks, it might still make its way down and be in the tank, but it usually ends up in filtration and it can clog the filtration. But is there anything else to worry about? Like, is there anything in hair of animals? I don't think there is, but I'm just asking.
It's a
Well, if
lot of
they had
surface area for
flea
bacteria.
treatment, though, right?
Wait,
Like,
what was, wait,
what
hang
if
on.
they
What was
just had
Chris
a
saying?
flea treatment?
That's probably another
And then
good
we're going to go
good
to Holly.
suggestion. Sorry, I was just saying that that's probably another good suggestion. But aside from like a flea treatment or some other sort of external stuff that you could be on your dog or cat or whatever, hair has a large surface area to volume ratio. So you might have a lot of dirt or contaminants on the hair, but the hair itself should be pretty inert and should be pretty harmless overall, unless, like Holly just mentioned, there's a flea treatment or something like that where you've got chemicals in the mix.
So, and that makes sense to me. I understand what you said about hair could be really dirty. But when you talk about shedding, you're not talking about drowning the cat in a tank, right? I mean, you're talking about some loose hairs that end
Not
up
unless
in the
your
tank.
cat jumps in the tank.
Or the cat jumps in the tank, right? But even then, they're not going to lose that much hair, I wouldn't think. I don't know, but I wouldn't. I like your points, but as Holly said, if you're talking about a flea treatment, like in my mind, I don't have the answer for this, honestly, but what I would do is instantly use Prime for any chemicals and then just do a water change. I mean, what else could you do? And maybe more carbon or, add more char to the char chamber or whatever. But what are you
in
going
that
to do?
instance, if you had a like a dog or a cat that had a flea treatment that somehow inadvertently ended up in your tank, what I would do is I would be very careful to specifically remove any invertebrates. So any snails, any crabs, anything that doesn't have a backbone, remove those from your tank because they will be very much affected by such treatments. And then your seahorses might not be affected in the same way as those animals, but those animals all dying and having a massive die-off in your tank might cause an ammonia spike and might cause issues for you very, very quickly.
Well, and that's another good point is, having test kits on hand, because ammonia is the first thing that you're looking for, but there's other test kits where you can tell if something's going wrong in the tank. That's a good point. And with removing invertebrates, Chris, because I really don't know, I know you're passionate about invertebrates and shrimp and snails and such. So I'm asking you, where you could say something happened, the cat had a flea treatment and it's, walking over something and it falls in the tank. Accident, you get it out, it's fine. Fish are fine. Is it a case where you would wait and see? Or is the reaction to invertebrates so immediate that you would remove them just to be safe?
I would remove them just to be safe if that situation played out. But it also depends on if the person has other tanks or has some water readily made up or available to put them in, because invertebrates are also very sensitive to rapid water changes. So, you can't just stick them in fresh water while you're making up the salt water or whatever. Or for some of them, having them out of water for an extended period of time while you're trying to make up the salt water might cause more harm than good. But it's a bit of a tough one.
So if you have other tanks, maybe put them in the other tanks or take water from those tanks so as to not cross-contaminate. Take water from those tanks to put them in while you fix the tank. Or if you're going to make up other water, make sure you make it up before you do anything, because everything you just said, that they're very delicate when it comes to changes, right? So, yeah. Having water ready and available to you is very good. Having salt water made up, that's one of the things that has saved me multiple times. I know everybody can't do it, but sometimes just having a gallon of salt water, mixing and ready and waiting, makes a world of difference. So I would definitely advise that. The other thing that I found, and again, these are things I'm finding, I'm not quoting on, or I'm not, saying I've experienced it or know about it. I'm just saying it. I read a lot of stuff about when I was thinking about Holly's situation where the dog licked the RODI water. And that's a different situation than a cat or dog licking tank water that's already mixed, has chemicals in it, has whatever in it, different situation. So I'm more talking about if we're talking about a tank, right? But then it comes into how does it affect the cat or dog, the chemicals in our tanks, and does the cat's saliva affect the chemicals in the tank? And I think, Holly, you made a comment in the group chat because I posted a link, and I'll post all these links afterwards. But it's evident that there's antibacterial properties in dog and cat saliva. And you said maybe what did you say?
Oh, I said maybe if a seahorse gets sick, I should have a dog lick it.
And we're not advising that, folks. That's not what we're advising in any way, shape, or form. But it's interesting reading. So I'm not going to act like an expert on this topic. If any of you have done any research on this, I invite you to pipe up and speak. I just thought I'd throw it out there, and I will post the links because I think it lets us develop further discussion, right? Maybe next week, maybe when you've had a chance to read it. I don't want to throw it out there and say this is fact, but it's pretty interesting to me to think about that maybe that saliva is helping the tank in some way. That just is insane to me, but maybe. So I'll give you guys the links and we'll go from there.
Well, I don't
Chris?
know if it's the same between, to me, it doesn't seem like a fish and a dog would have the same, bacterial effects.
Right.
Like a dog licking a wound of a land animal is probably a lot different than a fish.
Right.
I don't think it's the same. And that was my point when my friend was worried about it, was in my head, I was thinking, I don't think the bacteria of a dog would affect the seahorses negatively.
Right. And one of the things that was posted on one of these forums, again, not quoting scientific research, this is stuff that other people have experienced on forums. So, we tend to shy away from that. I'm bringing it up because I want us to discuss it further, and one person said, you might have some gram-negative antibacterial medication on hand in case you see something going on with the fish due to dog or cat saliva contaminating the tank. I don't know that much, you guys, about bacteria and how the bacteria from a dog or cat, as Holly said, might not be the same, but that's the advice on hand, is have gram-negative bacteria on hand, or antibacteria, medication on hand. And Robert King's clownfish mentioned bacteria love sugar when we were back talking about accidentally dosing sugar to the tank. The bacteria in the Robert King chamber is going to love it, eat it up, soak it up, and it's going to make it work better. So definitely not a crisis. But in this case, honestly, it just will take more research from all of us. But again, if your dog or cat licks your tank, it's not a case of freaking out. You talk about, even if there was something wrong with the saliva from a dog or cat, even if it did have the same bacterial properties that would affect fish, as Holly is saying, probably isn't the case, it would take a lot, right? It's not like one lick or a couple licks is going to, make your fish die. So, and coral's a different topic. I would love to get into this discussion further. Again, I don't know. So I'm asking you guys, let's talk about this more, because
now if my dog drank my tank water and then puked in it because it's salt water,
that's
then
different.
I'm worried about it.
That is a different topic. Yes, absolutely.
I was going to say I'd be a little bit more worried about the animals after drinking the salt water. They're probably going to have a bad time and be sick. But I would hope that they wouldn't be sick in the tank. That's like a worst case scenario. Then you've got lots of sick animals and a big mess to clean up.
Now, I have something interesting about drinking salt water here. I live in the woods, many of you know, and I feed squirrels and birds at my house. I feed the wildlife. I also dump my water change water into a hole I dug in the backyard. And it has become a very popular hangout for the
Water
local
hole.
wildlife. They love it. It's like a salt lick. I can't believe it, but I look out, I see squirrels and birds sitting there drinking the yucky salt water after I do a water change. And it doesn't seem to affect them that I'm seeing.
Well,
So
and you guys, like
they're
when
doing
Holly
it by
told,
choice. They're
right,
coming
you're
back
not
for
feeding
more.
it to them. They're right. You're not doing this on purpose. But when Holly told me this, I had no idea that like cows had a salt lick. I know, I obviously know fish, but that's it. But I just had no idea that animals needed salt, like cows and squirrels and such. And so when she told me this, I was like, oh my gosh. And she was like, no, no, no. It's normal. They're attracted to salt. They need more salt in their diet, whatever. And so I don't know like how it affects them, but it seems they really like it. It seems like a cat with catnip, right? They shouldn't have too much, but maybe the watering hole is a good thing for them. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know.
salt can be very addictive. Like salty foods are very
Right.
sort of appealing for humans and that. But
I'm really
the,
bad
the,
with
the thing you
salty
need to be
foods.
careful of is all good things in moderation. If the animals have too much salt, then it can actually do damage to their kidneys because they can't process it. They're not designed to process that much salt. And it's like if you're if you're shipwrecked or if you're on a whole bunch of broken up ship or whatever at sea and you've only got salt water to drink, it'll make you sick and dehydrate you really fast.
Well, and Ray just said dogs don't need a salt lick, and I know for a fact that it's injurious to small breed dogs for sure. Right, and we're not saying. I'm sorry if I said that incorrectly. We're not at all. Oh, sorry. We're not at all saying that it's a good thing. We're just saying in Holly's situation, she dug this hole to put the salt water, and they keep drinking it. So again, that's the question. They seem to love it, but if it's hurting them, she wants to stop it. They keep coming back alive. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
And it's not like they hang out there all the time, like they're drinking it all the time. But I see someone come now and then. And it's not the water itself, but the ground nearby.
Around it, just the salt. Yeah. So
but it attracts bugs also, like insects go there and get a drink, and then birds are coming and eating the insects, and yeah.
Well, and Zen Ginger said there are a lot of animals like horses and such that you do provide salt for.
Yeah.
So I mean, Holly's not providing salt for anything. She's just dug a
not on
hole.
purpose. It's just there.
Right. But it's interesting because Holly cares so much. I mean, Holly's like, these squirrels come up and during live streams will be on the back going, hello. I mean, like, she cares about these squirrels. So we're asking for a reason. If you have knowledge or have thoughts about this, please share. But yeah, okay. On with the questions. So we kind of got into cleaners. I know, Chris, that one thing that people with aquariums definitely say is don't use aerosol cleaners or air fresheners. You don't want like the Glade plugins that squirt out stuff into the air.
You don't want fly spray.
Talk about that.
You don't want fly spray or any sort of insecticides. I'm not sure exactly how they interact with seahorses because I've never tried it. But I know, once again, any invertebrates in your tank, any corals, any shrimp, any snails, any bristleworms, any invertebrates in general are going to have a really bad time with insecticides because they'll be adversely affected by it. So you could have any shrimp or whatever in your tank all die off at once, especially if you've got expensive or sentimentally valuable shrimp. And then you have the ammonia spike afterwards and all that to make your whole system go.
Any kind of die off is bad news for your tank. You don't want anything to die off in mass because then
Yeah,
you're
be
looking
very,
at
very careful
literal
if you're
water
bug bombing your
chemistry.
house. If you bug bomb your house, your tank's going to have a bad time.
So what does someone do if they have to bug bomb their house? What would be your advice?
I can't really advise on that, but my advice would be to get all the animals,
Not
especially
do
the
it.
ones that are really, really sensitive to it, and take them for a holiday, take them somewhere else, and
Yep.
you know, and then do a really deep clean of the tank afterwards, and then set it all back up and try again. But
And
yeah,
Ray said, not sure.
yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I
Go
would
ahead and
just say
finish.
that.
Sure how that works, but I've always used insecticide spray around the house. Right, but you're talking about around the house. I'm talking about if you have to, like,
Set off the
someone
bombs.
unfortunately gets like bed bugs or something. You've got to bomb your entire, or roaches or something terrible. You've got to bomb your entire house to get rid of them, whether you use a professional or your own stuff, and you can't like just leave the tank. I have seen people that have gotten professional advice and literally covered the tank
Yep.
with like, go ahead, Holly, tell.
I've done that with freshwater fish, not with saltwater. But
What did you do?
you turn off all your pumps. So you're not bringing any, air into the tanks. You cover your tanks, your sumps, and everything, and then you have to wait for the air to clear to turn stuff back on. I've never done that with saltwater tanks or the seahorses. I mean, I wouldn't do it at all at this point, but I've had goldfish, tanks and hardy freshwater fish at times where we did spray for something years ago, and they were all fine. But we covered everything up with sheets and turned everything off, and then opened all the doors and windows in the house, set up fans, and
Yep.
cleared all the smell out before turning stuff back on. And I want to say what we used at the time, it was a long, long time ago, but it was like some kind of a fogger. And we were
Yeah.
not professional pest people, just like some kind of fogger for, I don't even remember what it was for, but yeah, so
Yeah.
everything was okay. But at this point with my seahorses, I wouldn't do anything like that.
Right. In my case, I would go with what Holly and Chris both said. If I had to have professionals or even bomb my own house for anything, I would likely just remove the seahorses, put them in a tank somewhere else, and completely sterilize the tank before I set back up. You can always take like a Robert King chamber and all your filtration media, keep it cycled somewhere else, bring it back, and you can set up your tank in 10 minutes once it's clear. Zen Ginger said, maybe if you can't get rid of the animals, put all the tanks in the middle of the room with no circulation and cover them with tarps and duct tape it to the floor to secure it under it until it's settled. Right. And tarp may be the word I'm thinking of. I've seen people use these. It's more than tarp, though. It's like insulated, heavy things that they put over the tanks that somehow keep it secure. But I like the idea of duct taping it to the floor. I mean, if you're in the situation and you don't have a choice. And Cora Works said, I waited until I moved to run the flea foggers because I was too scared to try saran wrap and everything. Imagine if the filter for my air pump got contaminated and then poisoned everything. Right. And that's the thing.
I think that was what we sprayed for. I think it was fleas, a flea infestation, I believe. And yeah, that was years ago. And yeah, all my fish back then, I want to say it was goldfish, which are really super hardy anyway. But yeah, we covered everything up, and honestly, I mean, then there wasn't a problem with those fish, but honestly, I would be too scared.
Yeah.
with the seahorses to spray any insecticide in my house now.
I get it. And that's the conversation. And Zen said, yeah, if there was any other option, she'd do that. But in
Yeah.
worse, I know it has worked for people for sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
it does.
Coro said fleas are gone. It worked
Yeah.
for Holly, right? So again, this is just discussion because nobody has a real answer. Oh, if you do this, you're safe, right? It's
Mhm.
up to your risk tolerance level, what you're willing to risk, and how bad the situation is. Like I said, I would probably move the animals, especially inverts, as Chris pointed out, because that's even worse. And what do you guys think about not insecticides but cleaners? So like we know everything online says don't use Glade air fresheners. Don't use aerosol hairspray or anything like that. I looked into it. It's
Mhm.
very scientific. I'm not scientific. It's something about aerosol in the air, collects with molecules, and then ends up in the tank. Very, very basic. I'm not scientific.
Mhm.
But Chris, do you have any thoughts on aerosol and why it's
It would
bad and
depend
what?
on the specific aerosol and the compounds that it had in it, but carbon would be a good thing to run in those instances, but without knowing exactly what it is and how it works and how carbon reacts with it, it's hard to know whether it would actually help or how it would help.
Right.
Um,
Well, I do agree. Everything that I've read says, add carbon to your tank if you're worried. But the thing is, like I said, I've got teenage daughters that go
Mhm.
around spraying their crap, and I'm freaking out constantly. Get away from my tank! And they're never that close to the tank, but in the same room, which
Mhm.
everyone says is a no-no. And my significant other loves to clean the kitchen, and the all-in-one Seahorse tank is our kitchen's open, like it's not a closed room. It's like you walk through the kitchen to get to the fish room, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
It's just like a little doorway, but it's
Mhm.
open. And he cleans like crazy all the time. And I'm like, please chill out with the cleaner. If it's smelling that strong to me, it's got to
Mhm.
be getting in the tank, right? I mean, it's right there. And we've never had a problem. I don't.
I think it depends on how much. I don't use cleaners like that around my fish tanks or
Mhm.
aerosols of any kind, but I do burn Yankee candles in the same room as my tanks. I do use Glade plugins. I
Wait, not in the same room though, right?
My plugins are not in the same room, but my burners are. Like I have those
Hmm.
things that burn the wax melts.
Okay.
So I use one of those, like I have one going right now, and it's about probably 6 to 7 feet away from the tank that's in this room because it sits up on my bar. And then I have a plug-in in my hallway,
Mhm.
which is pretty far away from the tanks. I don't spray anything in there. I wash my hands before I handle the tanks, but I do use like lotions and things sometimes. And I mean, so there's a chance something. Oh, and I tan during the summertime. I'm putting on tanning oils and stuff. And once in a while, I'll have my hand in the tank and I'll see the oil skim on the top of the water
Yep.
of the tank. I'm like, oh, my tanning oil, I forgot to wash off. Yeah,
I was
but I haven't had any issues with any of those things.
I was gonna say there have been times that I've whatever cooked spaghetti for the kids. I don't know, but somehow from the spatch something ends up on my hand, and
Uh
even though
huh.
I washed it off, it's still there. And I go to do something in the tank, and I get that oil skim on the top, and it's like, ah, shit. And I'm over there with a
Oops.
based off the topic. That's possible.
I let the skimmer take. I don't worry about it really.
I was just I'm agreeing with you because that's what I think the key is.
Yeah.
If you've set up your tank with proper filtration, something like that in a minor dose is not going to be the end of the world, right? If you have a Robert King chamber, if you have a decent skimmer, if you have carbon or whatever you're using as filtration, a Purigen, that's what it's called, right? Purigen, yeah.
Mhm.
If you have prime on hand for an emergency, those kind of things will save you in any of these circumstances. I've never had anything, whether it be invertebrate or seahorse or fish or coral, freak out and drop dead because there was a little oil skim on the top of the tank. Is it good? No. No, I should be more careful. Absolutely. But I just don't think,
Now, I've
that it's the end of the
also
world.
heard those same things are bad for cats and dogs.
Okay.
Same thing. But I had all those things going all the time that I had my cats and dogs and never had any issues with them, either due to those things. And it's kind of like I read, they say poinsettias are poisonous. The
Okay.
cats, I think maybe dogs too, like certain plants, lilies, different things like that. And I think it kind of depends on how sensitive that particular animal is to it. Because then I actually did more research on poinsettias and found that they actually really aren't that poisonous to animals. So sometimes
Right.
things out there that people say, "Oh, it's a really big deal," and it's actually really not.
Not. Right.
Like I
Right. Well,
remember,
that's
my dogs were about 70 pounds. And one time, my husband and I were visiting friends. It was like Christmas Eve. We were going to people's houses, dropping off gifts and little parties and things. And we had a whole box of like fudge and chocolates and things that a friend had given us.
right.
And we stopped into a store for a few minutes and forgot the dogs were with us and left this box of goodies in the truck with the dogs. The dogs ate it. And I was freaking out because you always hear, chocolate
Don't
is
feed dogs
poisonous
chocolate.
to
Right.
dogs. Okay, so I went online to research and found out that really has a lot to do with the size of the dog and how much chocolate they ate. And the conversion for my dogs was basically for it to harm them. They would have had to eat about 6 or 7 pounds of chocolate, which they didn't. It was, a few treats. So it didn't affect them at all. They didn't even get sick.
Right. Well,
Had
and
they been
and
a
that's the key.
tiny dog that had a chihuahua eating a pound of chocolates, that's a different story.
Well, that's the key is we can't sit here and say, "Hey, don't worry about this. It won't be a big deal," because it
Mhm.
depends on
Yeah.
size of your tank, size of your dog, size of your filtration, what you've got going on as filtration. If you've got a standalone tank, something like this could be absolutely devastating. If you've got a tiny dog that ate all these chocolates, that could be devastating, right? But so it all depends. But just overall, if you have a decent sized tank with skimmer and equipment, Robert King chamber, carbon, etc., it's just not that big of a worry. You can go to work and know that they're not going to be dead. Maybe dose prime just to make yourself feel better, but you can go to work and come home and know that it's going to be okay, right? And one of the things I was reading too about cleaners and such is they advise, many people online advise, instead of using those cleaners, first of all, If you can avoid aerosol, I would absolutely agree with that, because the aerosol puts it into the air where it can travel
Mm-hmm.
throughout. But they say just use vinegar and
Mm-hmm.
hydrogen peroxide. Vinegar stinks. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to clean with vinegar. It stinks. I mean, do you have a thought for that, Holly?
I use vinegar in my kitchen actually because I have a glass top stove and I clean it with vinegar. As far as
Doesn't it stink up the room?
it does, but vinegar smell doesn't bother me really.
Oh.
So I think it's kind of a personal thing. For cleaning, actually, the front glass and acrylic on my tanks, I use either like a mix of alcohol and water, or I have a safe aquarium cleaner spray that I like to use that comes in a bottle and it spritzes on and it's safe for the aquarium. So I use that or a mix of alcohol and water, which is what I use like to clean my glasses and computer screens and things like that. So, I mean, around the fish tanks, I use stuff like that. But like in the rest of my house, I use regular cleaners like pine sol and things like that. And you can smell it in the room, even where the seahorses are. But I think just the concentration isn't enough to harm them.
Well, no, I'm definitely not worried about vinegar near the seahorse tank. I've
Mhm.
dosed with vinegar. That's not a fear for me. I just don't like the smell.
Yeah.
And I do know that Zen Ginger said, no, it was Ray said you can add lemon extract to the vinegar. That's a really good.
And
I
that'll
like
smell
that.
good. Yeah.
I'm gonna do that. And
Lemon is a
Ray,
good cleaner itself too. Some lemon and water, lemon juice and water.
love that. I'm going to do that. And he also said, Kelly, shut down the system, let the oils float and soak up with paper towels. Another good point. Ray, you need to be in here. But yeah, when we were talking about oils from your hands
Mhm.
or from whatever, you see an oil film, turn off the tank, use paper towels to soak it up. Great point, Ray. And in peroxide, I like to, like, everything in my tank I clean with peroxide. I love peroxide for soaking, for running the skimmer through and such. Because again, with vinegar though, when you're cleaning pumps and such, doesn't vinegar, like, I think vinegar dosing, aren't you, like, if it's algae that's a problem, the vinegar is going to help the algae, not hurt it, right? Or am I way off on that?
I don't use vinegar for tank cleaning at all.
Okay.
I use bleach solution or peroxide. The thing about peroxide I don't like is that it's more expensive. Like if you need a lot of it,
Yeah.
to soak something, I like it. I'll put it like on a little cotton pad, like those little face cleansing pads. I'll put peroxide on a pad and use it to wipe stuff or clean it that way. But I don't do much soaking in peroxide because it takes so much of it and it's expensive compared to, a cup of bleach and 5 gallons of water. And that's the main reason I don't use peroxide for soaking things
Well,
in.
and soaking in bleach is fine for ornaments and things like that
Exactly. Yeah.
that you allow to dry, or even
Yeah.
your anything you want to soak, fine, but you have to allow it to dry or run it through
Hmm.
prime before you add it back to the tank. And I always get nervous with bleach. Like, I'm so afraid that, I understand in my brain that
If it's
bleach
dry
dissipates. I
completely,
know, but
is
that's what I'm saying. Like, if you're talking about a pump, is it dried completely or
I
is there
don't
some
use
part in
it for
there?
pumps though. That's a
I know,
situation
I
where I
know.
use the peroxide. That would be when I use the peroxide. For the tank decorations, I use
Yeah.
bleach. And then this stuff usually sits outside or next to the fireplace and I I just remember being told if it's dry completely, the
It's
bleach
fine.
has dissipated and it's safe. So I just make sure it's rinsed well and then completely dry before I use the thing again. Now for pumps, you're right. It's if it because you can't tell. You can't
Right.
see what's in there if it's dry or not. So in that
But what you can
situation,
do,
I use peroxide.
What'd you say, Chris?
what you can do with what you can do with the pump is you can run it in a bucket and just run it in fresh water and just make it recirculate that, and that will rinse any residual bleach or any residual other stuff out of it. It'll just dilute it to nothing.
How
To
long
nothing.
though would you run it?
Just a minute or two, just enough
Oh, you don't think that
to
much?
wash. Yeah,
See,
yeah.
and with
Ray
me,
had it earlier that the solution to pollution is dilution, and it's true.
that's right. I need to put that up. Yep, absolutely. And I agree with that. With me, I pour some prime in just to be safe because I'm a nervous wreck and I'd be worried. But yeah, as long as it's either completely dry or you have washed it thoroughly, you're going to be fine. Chris, any thoughts on using cleaners near the tank or on
Yeah,
tank
definitely.
items?
So in my time at Seahorse World and even Ocean Reef Aquaculture, we would use bleach to clean tanks. Not while there's any livestock in them, of course, but it's a good way of sterilizing a tank. Bleach is fantastic for that. Just make sure you after you leave the bleach in there for however long, you remove it and then rinse it and wash it really well. Make sure that there's no residual bleach before adding your salt water back in and livestock. Also to like for external cleaning, like you say you want to remove smudges and that from the glass. Vinegar is fantastic for that. I wouldn't use bleach for that because there's a risk of inadvertently getting some in the tank. But something else that I've found works really, really well is alcohol wipes. So whether they're dedicated alcohol wipes, if you can source those for cleaning, or like nappy wipes. Nappy wipes work fantastic for removing any like oily residue from handprints, fingerprints, whatever. At Seahorse World, being a public aquarium, you get all sorts of people coming through. You get all sorts of, you get little kids with little sticky fingers and hands and putting their hands on the tanks and, trying to interact, I guess, with the animals. Alcohol wipes work fantastically for cleaning those, and they were part of the repertoire there. But yeah, vinegar is a fantastic cleaner. It does smell a little bit, but when you're used to fishy smells and much worse smells, it doesn't really bother me. I'm not sure if it bothers other people, Kelly.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't like it, but I can stand it. It's the other people in my house that are like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" You know. Anyways, okay. Well, I think we covered that pretty well. Moving along, cigarettes, cigarette smoke, and ashes. What are your guys' thoughts? Here's what I researched and learned, because if you have a smoker in your house, you got to think that smoke is everywhere. It stains the walls, it stains everything. And then if you are a smoker and ashes get dropped into the tank, how bad is that, right? So some of the things I have read, not necessarily saying they're true, just read, is that smoke contains non-soluble compounds with varying degrees of gravity and ionic charges ranging from oils to solids. So yes, being aerated into the water column through a skimmer and or by settling on the water, the solubles in smoke can certainly be absorbed into the water.
I think the biggest problem there, the biggest way it'll get into your water, aside from just like, osmosis, like smoke sitting on the water or being in contact with the water, if smoke goes through your air pump, goes in through whatever intake on your air pump, and then gets pumped as air into your tank, that will drastically increase its surface area and uptake into the water. So obviously, if you're smoking, don't blow smoke on your air pump, because that'll be going straight through to your fish or your seahorses or shrimp or whatever.
Well, and when I was keeping the reef tank, one I always battled was pH, right? I always struggled with pH. And one of my mentors had me run an air, because I have smokers in my house, he had me run an air line out of the house to the open air so that it was getting fresh air into the skimmer, because the smoke in the house was not good. Like I don't know the scientific process behind that.
It's not even just smoke. The carbon dioxide when you breathe out, so you breathe in, you get your oxygen. You breathe out, you'll breathe out more carbon dioxide than what you breathe in. Carbon dioxide actually brings down the pH level as well. So
Right.
you need to have buffers or alkaline to basically buffer it back up, or you will notice a decline over time where your pH will actually drop from its normal levels.
Zen Ginger. No. But I was going to say, if you're a smoker, if you have smokers in your house, just that might be a circumstance. A lot of times in the Seahorse world, we're like, we don't even measure pH. We don't even test our tanks, because once it's cycled and good, you test ammonia once in a while, but they can handle all the other stuff. pH does actually matter. Like, don't chase it. Nobody's saying chase it. But if you have a smoke house or a smoker house, maybe consider that. Maybe test it and use buffers if you need to. I've never needed to in the Seahorse tanks, but I do have good skimmers, and if they're not working well enough, I run them outside the house. Just a topic for thought and conversation. And
I saw earlier Robert King mentioned that one of his followers dumped their ashtray in their tank.
Yep. What did he say about it? I missed it.
I'd be curious to know how it affected the tank, how they dealt with it, or that was earlier in the conversation. So
I'm looking for it, but I'm guessing he didn't give us the result.
Yeah,
And
I don't know if he's still here. I'd be curious to know the story of that, how it went. And
well, if you're still here, let us know. But I think he left. I know we said goodbye to him in the chat a minute ago. I would say that Robert King is plenty willing to come back and be a guest again. I'll see if he can come. I don't know about next week because holidays, but I'll see the next time he can come. And Holly, it's your job to remember that question, because I won't.
Yeah,
You got to remember to ask
I'll
him
try.
how dumping a cigarette ashtray into a tank affects it. But I would say, and I can't wait to have him back in here to talk about the newest stuff with the char chamber and also this topic. But I did read, and I'll post all these articles that I'm quoting, but that cigarette ashes could go to good use, removing arsenic from water. Apparently, there's carbon in them. I mean, just crazy to me. I mean, like,
so
I've
you're
seen
carbon
in my own
dosing.
tanks, ashes be accidentally into the tank and freaked out because you can't collect cigarette ash, right? I'm curious to know his story too, and what happened and how it affected. I don't think, again, it's a case for freaking out. I would have to do more research and bring in some experts. But in the case of my tanks, when ash has made its way to the tank, nothing's ever happened. Any thoughts? Anybody, Chris?
I wouldn't go like flicking your ash into the
No,
tank.
I'm not. Oh yeah.
I'm just wondering if when Scott's,
using...
I might have to watch and see when Scott's smoking his weed, do my fish get really mellow?
And Holly just made sure this video is non-monetized. Awesome. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine. What I would
Holly,
say,
I don't think you're going to worry about that. I think you're going to have to worry about your seahorses having the munchies afterwards.
Right.
Maybe that's why they're hungrier sometimes.
They're always hungry.
I would say, very big disclaimer, as Chris said, we are not advising flicking ashes into your Seahorse tank. Do not use it as carbon dosing method. But I would say if it accidentally happens, don't freak out. I don't think it's contaminating the tank. I don't think it's going to be the end of the world. Maybe do a water change. If you got to go to work, do it when you get home. It's not a crisis, is kind of my point. I just am thinking about all the times that things have happened in my life, in my tanks, and where I freaked out, really called into work because I thought it was such a crisis. And it really wasn't, it just really wasn't. So
Well, I imagine nicotine can't be good for them, but it probably would take so long for it to affect them that
well, and
it's
so
probably
much.
span.
I've been more worried about the cigarette butt. The cigarette butt's where you're going to accumulate all of the nicotine.
Yeah.
And nicotine is actually water soluble, so it can actually get into your tank and it will cause problems for aquatic life.
Absolutely.
I'm going to have to make a move shortly, guys. But one last thing that I was going to bring up for today, because it's unusual contamination, a pretty common one that crops up is actually from magnets being exposed to the salt water or whatever and expanding. That's actually one that commonly comes up from the magnets that are on, power heads and magnet cleaners and whatnot. If you ever notice that your magnet on your cleaner or on any of your equipment on the wet side has expanded, it's probably time to replace that and get rid of it. Otherwise, you risk losing corals, shrimp, invertebrates, snails, crabs, or potentially even seahorses if the levels build up high enough.
So wait, what's going on? Why is that happening?
Oh, well, sometimes, if you've got, say, a magnet cleaner that you clean your tank with, if it gets wear and tear over time, or if it develops a crack, or if salt water gets into it, the magnet itself can react with the salt water and start dissolving into the water, and then you get metals leaching into your water, which can adversely affect your corals in particular. Corals are very sensitive to heavy metals in their water, but other invertebrates are very sensitive to it as well, and seahorses probably wouldn't appreciate it too much either.
So you're saying that somehow the magnet gets
it breaks down or starts corroding? Is it like corrosion would be the same thing?
Yeah, I see it quite often in reef groups. People post that they're having issues with corals or whatever, and they try going through everything to figure out where their issue's coming from, and then they do an ICP test, and then it turns out that they've got heavy metals in the tank, and it's come from, and they've traced it back to like a wave maker or something that's got a magnet in the tank, and that magnet's kind of gone over time, and that's caused the issue. So that's an unusual.
So do you just? No. I love it. And so do you just how do you?
Well, from there, you would try and manually remove any like metals that have fallen off it or whatever, which can also be done with a magnet usually. But I would also do water changes or run carbon to try and remove, any copper or any heavy metals that might come from that, or any
Totally agree. But I mean prevention. How would you
just periodically whenever you're cleaning your magnet cleaners or whatever, like if you sort of clean your tank or do a deep clean every 6 months or something, just take them out, manually inspect them, make sure that they're okay, or if you need to move them for whatever reason, just manually inspect the wet side, just make sure that they're not expanding or they're not showing any signs of unusual wear or tear or being deformed or anything like that. If they are starting to look a bit suspect, then maybe it's time to replace them.
Love it. No, great unusual contaminant. Great addition to the show. I'm so glad you came tonight, Chris. And very good points.
Yeah, and we do use my Seahorse feeders are magnetic. Those feeders that come from salt critters that magnetize to the tank. They're they're made by a 3D printer, and the magnets are embedded inside of the plastic. So that's
Yeah.
something to
So if
think
the plastic
about.
ever breaks or there's a pinhole or whatever,
Mhm.
especially if you notice that there's any like discoloration, like if you see like a rust color around the glass or around the acrylic near where they are on the surface, and that could be an indicator that you've got a magnet that's leaked or has gone bad, and might be time to swap it out.
Great point. I love it.
All right.
All
Well, I'm
right.
going to have to
Well,
leave you guys go anyways, but fantastic having a chat today. Always love popping on and saying good day.
love having you here, Chris. And I wish I had more time to ask you more questions about what you're up to next time. And
That's
good
okay.
to see you.
Nice to see you,
Fantastic.
Chris.
All right.
Well, if I don't see you, have a happy holiday and have a happy new year.
You
You
too.
too.
Absolutely.
Bye, guys.
Bye, Chris.
Bye. Hey, he's, literally in another country, so hey, we forgive him. But Holly and I are probably going to call it quits for tonight too. We're trying to make these a little bit shorter, so yay. But we love having you here and love having these discussions. A lot of times I might not have the answers, but that's why I bring up the topics so we can talk about it further and figure it out together, right? And we're always here for you for Seahorse questions. So I didn't have any out of the scope tonight, but if you have a question, you're always welcome to ask it topic. We will get to it and we will answer it. But anything more for tonight, Holly, or you think we covered it?
No, I think we covered it tonight.
All right. Well, don't freak out about those unusual contaminants. Give it a minute, process it, and figure out how to fix it. But don't freak out and, don't call off work like I always have. With that, let's say Happy Wine Wednesday. We'll be back next week to talk more. And if there's further questions about this, we'll discuss them further. But for tonight, Happy Wine Wednesday.
Happy Wine Wednesday. Cheers.